Hello. Ah, welcome to all the folks that were hanging out with Foxy. Good to see you. Man, what a week. What a week. So Dr. Maz selling his house. Kingfisher's Catch about to have Gary Lang up there in Calgary. Nice, nice, nice. That'll be fun. I'm sure that will be a really good event. I would love to eventually hit one of the events in Canada just because it sounds fun, you know. Plus, maybe I could get to hang out with the like few Canadians I know. It's not a ton of them. But yeah, happy Tuesday. What can we talk about before we get into the topic itself? Hmm. Um, Last weekend did a bunch of. I got to see my cousin who I haven't seen in a while. So for those who've been around a long time, remember cousin Henry from the Petco Horror Stories videos. Um, yeah, got to hang out with my cousin, which is really awesome. I haven't seen him in, I think, 4 or 5 months. It's been a bit. Um, yeah, so it was good. Got to hang out, talk, just catch up with each other. He's been working a ton. He got like a promotion at his job, but then was doing both his old job and his new job at the same time while they're trying to find someone to replace him at his old role. And they finally found someone and started spooling that person up, but that person goes on maternity leave shortly. And so it's kind of like, I got somebody, but I don't got somebody. Just kind of funny, but you know, their company thankfully is like really good about stuff. They're like, no, please take your maternity leave. Don't force yourself back early. We want you to do the thing. And while I was talking to him, I kind of explained how some of the maternity leave and paternity leave was taken by some of my coworkers at Amazon because I think the way that they do it is really cool, or at least the way that we did it internally in my organization, which is to say, they would take the first like half or so of their maternity or paternity leave. This is more common with paternity leave, which makes sense, right? And they would take it completely off. And then they would come back like part-time. So they'd be like half using leave and half kind of spooling back up, playing catch up, getting back used to their duties, and slowly shifting to work like, okay, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks maybe, depending on how much leave you had, I'm half time, and then after that, I'm like 75% of the time, where it's like maybe I'm only taking a day off or 2 day or day and a half, whatever, to help. And it was a little different for maternity leave, but similar, where they would stage slowly back into like working full time instead of going from not working at all to all the way back at once. And it made the transition a lot easier. That's kind of like, hey, you might, I don't know what your policies are, but you might talk about this with your coworker just in case, because if she's trying to like rush back, you might go, well, hey, why don't you try this instead, so you don't like not use your entire maternity leave, because you absolutely should. It's there for a reason, right? Things like that. He's like, oh, cool idea. And we talked about a bunch of other totally non-work related stuff because that's what we do. But yeah, we're not talking about fish yet, Mario. It's coming. But yeah, it was good. I got to catch up with the cousin. I did some work getting the Anoxic tank started. So now that I've kind of got all my stuff buffered and the substrate start charged, I've started adding bacteria cultures using just some Fritzyme and a little bit of ammonium chloride to feed them. So like kind of the next step is I need to remove one of the two tubes, chop the other tube down quite a lot, and then shift the air down to get into that slow moving plenum, and thus start working toward building the full setup for the anoxic system, I guess is more accurate, because it's going to take a while for anoxic bacteria to form and all those kind of things, right? But this is the start of it, just kind of getting everything rolling. I'm going to make sure that we're seeing like, some level of aerobic bacteria being put together there. So I might add like a small sponge filter or something, or maybe a box filter in there, because there's not really like particulates floating around. But just to move and have a house for aerobic bacteria, because we're trying to do that slow moving plenum, right? So we want to try to generate anoxic bacteria, not necessarily aerobic bacteria, in the substrate. Gotta see how things go for now first, but might make some small adjustments. We'll see. Okay, I want to talk about the topic, and then we can get into some other stuff. So, for those who've been around for a while, and I'll link this in chat just in case you haven't seen this. I have a video from a couple years ago where I talked about how I had this period where I was in this when I first kind of started the aquarium hobby, and I was unemployed for like a fairly big stretch because my old contract at the time with Microsoft had ended, and I could have potentially gone homeless if not for fish. Could have lost my house. Kelly, yes, the plants are here. Sorry. I forgot to answer that last time, and I totally meant to email you, but my brain went right out the window. So I have them. I need to put them in substrate. They've been floating, and they're not super happy, but they're here. I need to make them happier before they go into their final tank, which is the one probably brother-in-law James's tank. That's probably where those are going to end up. Anyway, so I talked about that story, but I've kind of had, I guess I'd say, I've seen a lot of stuff recently in talking to some folks when I was at my club's auction, which, one sec, there was a comment, Shirley. There we go. Saw me at the auction, but always say hi. Anytime you see me anywhere, always say hi. Never be afraid to say hi. I love meeting people and talking to people. So next time, Shirley, say hi. But I was talking to some friends, and we had this, I think I mentioned there's one person who was getting a divorce, so they were basically selling their entire fish room. And I kind of wanted to talk about the two times so far that since I've come back to this hobby, right, and committed to the craziness I'm doing now, that I almost quit. I've been on the verge of quitting probably 3 times total. But 2 are the real ones. And the third one it would have been an emergency type situation. But I can, maybe if I don't take too long, I can get onto that third one. So the first time. You guys will remember the video, for long-term fans, maybe shorter, newer fans will know it too, but when I lost my zebra pleco colony, that hurt really bad. So the short story, right, is I combined 2 pieces of advice that should not have been combined. And I was rushing so hard because I knew that they were adults. I knew that they were close to where I could get spawning, and I was just so excited at the chance to see baby zebras, mostly because I wanted to keep them all, that I rushed. And I did a couple of things that in combination were detrimental. And because of it, things got out of control, and parameters got really bad. And I lost all of my zebra plecos basically in a massive crash overnight. It was over a course of a couple days, but the damage was done one night, and I had 2 alive that I tried to save, but they just could not recover because the damage was too far gone. That really hurt. Because one, you look at it I'm sure all of us do this, but if you have an entire tank crash, you kind of look at it not only in a how did I screw up this bad? But also how much money did I just lose? And do I really want to try again? And when you're talking zebra plecos, they ain't cheap. And when they're adult size, they're 3.5, 4 years old, there's that time investment, and it soul crushes a little harder. But the thing that I took away from that, and in that video that I did, which if you haven't seen it, look it up. It's my worst day in fish keeping. I just learned an important lesson, and I stressed this in that video, which is that even if you're getting advice from people who really know what the heck they're doing, don't try to adjust too many things at once. And realistically, just be more patient. I was trying to rush. I was trying to rush and I went against my own normal, like, mental headspace, which is take your time, be patient, let nature do its thing. Then instead, I was like, well, I've got these pieces of advice from these people who breed zebra plecos regularly. And they're two different pieces of advice. And, I can kind of do both at the same time. I know I can do this. And maybe maybe that'll be the trigger. And I'll finally get there and I'll be so happy. And in the end, it was like, I killed my colony because I'm an idiot. Because I wasn't patient. And yeah, I mean, like, even that, Jessica Chat is saying being patient is the most difficult one for me. I think it is for almost all of us. So many of us just we struggle really hard with that, like, that desire to do something versus that part of us that's deep in the back of our head. This is like, just wait, just take your time, right? Because when we latch onto something new in a hobby, we're like, ooh, the big shiny thing, really, really want it. And this happens, I think, in almost every hobby, where if we see an opportunity to do something faster, it's so hard to resist that. It's so hard until we have like some horrible mistake that teaches us, like, hey, stop doing that. and it sucks, right? But the biggest lesson I took was stop rushing. Be patient. 3G, hurry up and get to the point. Oh, man. Now, the second time might be a little more interesting because I think the lesson is a little harder to understand. Maybe not. Maybe I'm trying to do deep in thought about this. So this is a little isolated because it happens more to, like, us as creators. For those of us who do, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or pick a platform, right, who are us as creators, you will have tons. The percentage is usually very swayed, but I've seen this in a lot of different places where it's so easy to focus on the negatives that we see, whether it's negative comments or people who just, like, never let anything go. And a great example of this is I would talk about projects I really wanted to get done. And probably the one that has been the biggest kick in the teeth was when I wanted to do the Master Aquatic Horticulturist program, which I still want to do. And had literally invested close to $2,000 into like independent developer because I didn't want to hire some company. And while that company would have cost me like just a little bit more, I really wanted to support like an independent dev and have like a nice partnership. And then that person just ghosted me when we were like probably only about 60% done, but some of the hard work was done. And, the problem is that, like, a lot of the code and things like that actually functioned, I didn't have control of. So where the code sat was outside of my control. And when that person ghosted me, I could not get to it no matter what I did. And, having folks who, like, admittedly, like, this is a program I wanted to do. And I had said, like, if I would do one thing, what's the one thing you guys want me to do? And that won in a landslide, right? And then I'd have people constantly ask me about it. And there's few things that make you feel more like a failure than when something that people are really excited about gets derailed for something kind of out of your control. And sometimes it's in your control. Do not get me wrong. Sometimes it's in your control. But most of the time it's not. And you keep getting questions and you just don't know how to say, like, look, somebody took me for $2,000 and all the work that I've put in is gone. And I can't recover from it at the moment. And then I went into, like, working my brains out on a couple of different projects for my actual work. So trying to pursue it made it really difficult. And I didn't have the funds because I I very intentionally don't heavily monetize my channel, right? Um, and just because I, like you, I hate ads, so I try to cut them down as much as possible. But YouTube seems to be fighting me on that, which is annoying as all get out. And seeing people who are really excited about something, hoping that like we can get this going, but knowing like I have to start from ground zero, and I either have to have another large cash investment, which because of some other outside real world things, like all of my savings was basically gone between like some old medical debt I had to deal with my wife and things like that. Whatever, this is all stuff in the past at this point, thankfully. But it it kind of ate at me, and you get this too in comments. Like you'll get people who are like constantly asking about one thing, and I mean like here, just because like I've kind of gotten past this, grown as a human being, but like when people constantly complain about this, where it's like, yeah, I have other stuff going in my life. I'm sorry I don't have all the time in the world to like take this down, build something completely new from ground up when I'm working on a bunch of different things, right? And it's like, don't get me wrong, it's basically only Leo that gets triggered by this. It's not. It's like there's several people, but like when I keep doing it, it's really hard for some creators to look past the one thing that might eat at you a little bit for the like 99% that is awesome and positive, which in general, most people are just like, they're having fun. I know Leo's not like legitimately angry at me. I know he's harassing me. We have a good relationship, and I understand that. And I've grown past with things, but for a lot of creators, I see like burnout or things like that, and I think part of it is it's so easy to focus on the negative things that it makes you just want to go, F it. I'm done putting up with X. Um, but the way that I thankfully have been able to grow past that is, and part of the reason why I keep streaming, this is part of the reason I keep streaming, is these kind of interactions that we get to have with chat, where it's not always like me, where you see like, Kelly and a couple other people are all talking, they're having fun. We're getting to hang out. This is a very community feeling. And it's like digitally sitting in a room with a group of friends talking, right? And that's the part that like allows me to get past the negative side. And like in general, I'm pretty good at not caring about negative comments. Usually it's like if how to put this, when they're non-fish related, like, we used to get trolls every once in a while, like say some really heinous crap. That never bothers me because I grew up in like gamer spaces. I'm used to really horrible, toxic people. So that little stuff just doesn't bother me. Yeah, the AI here is just to mess with some people on purpose. That's my way to fight back. But I know a lot of people that get in that headspace, and it's the only thing they can think about is the negative, even though maybe 99% of the things that are out there are positive. It might even be higher than that. It might be like 99.9, right? It might be 1 in 1,000 that is negative. But it's so easy for us as people to focus on the negative. So, and it's one thing that I've tried really hard to help some of my friends and colleagues is to like focus on your positives. I, in general, am a very optimistic human being. I tend to look at the silver lining in everything when I'm working with people or when I have people on my team. I see the best of them. I always see what they can be. And I very rarely focus in on their faults unless it is something where I feel there's an opportunity to help them grow their skills or grow their career, right? And this is most usually when I'm working. It's kind of hard to do that in aquatics, but it's still the same thing, right? We can get somebody who's like Leo as an example, right? Leo has this like rapacious energy to like try new things and really loves this hobby. But sometimes he doesn't have that patience. And like Leo and I talk a lot through the members Discord in general. And sometimes it's me kind of being like, buddy, slow down. Doesn't always listen. But there's things like that where occasionally you can help somebody, help them understand like the way that you do things, and maybe that builds a new good habit. Not always, but maybe. But sometimes it's so easy for us as people to focus on the negatives that it's really hard to find the positives. And one of the biggest reasons why I've never quit this hobby, and I can't really foresee myself ever truly quitting, I've pared down a lot recently in the last year and a half, 2 years, maybe it's 2 years now. Jeez, I've pared down a lot. And you guys have seen that in the fish room, right? I've gone from a bunch of smaller tanks and some of my when I was trying to like breed or raise up smaller fish when I had more time, I've converted those in from like 12-gallon tanks to a 40-gallon tank, right? So my number of tanks has changed, but my gallonage is kind of the same or maybe even increased. And it's just a matter of like changing how my hobby is, right? I'm not trying to breed a bunch of fish, but I'm really enjoying having planted pseudo display. They're not really like full out crazy aquascapes, but pseudo display tanks to enjoy my fish, right? And those things bring me a lot of relaxation, a lot of peace. And that's why it'd be almost impossible to quit this hobby. I might pare down. Like it might be one of those things where for some reason, and let me tell the third story really fast. There was a period right at the start of the pandemic. I was working easily 65 to 70 hours a week. Plus, I was on the road for 3 hours a day, at least 6 days a week. This is when I was working at Microsoft. I was on a like really, really important project, and I was both building a team and doing a bunch of work that like we were just way understaffed. So people were working a ton. And before brother-in-law James had moved in, that left just my wife at home with all of the dogs, right? So when I would get home, I would already be kind of exhausted, and it'd be really hard to honestly give her the attention she needed. And I remember I had this conversation with my wife at one point, girlfriend at the time, right? Wife now, but I told her because frankly, I knew she was the one that way back then, but I said, if you want me to, I will stop YouTube. I will stop my entire fish hobby. It'll get you like 4 hours a week, maybe at that time, but I'll stop everything if you ask me to. And thankfully, my wife, my wife understood how much this hobby brought me just that small slice of sanity that I could work 70 hours a week and not lose my mind. And that I could come home to also try to get things done around the house, to cook, to clean, to do all those things. Now, thankfully, since brother-in-law James has moved in, he helps with a bunch of that stuff, made life a lot easier, and other changes. But I was close. It was legitimately very close. And if my wife had said, "Yeah, I want you to give up everything," I would have. Thankfully, she understood how much fish, and she could tell by the way that I talk about things, right? Because if I'm very passionate about things, I can be exhausted out of my mind, but if I start talking about that thing I'm passionate about, instantly I have energy, and I'm in it like with an almost religious zealotry. Right? It's just when I'm passionate about things, I love them, love them, love them. So she understood that. So thankfully, we didn't have to blame my wife for me disappearing off the face of the planet when it comes to fish and those things. And yeah, definitely why I kept her, as Breezy is saying, and eventually married her, because I had a good feeling to start, and the fact that she not only understands that I have hobbies, but like encourages them heavily. We were talking this weekend, and I was like, "Oh, I'm, supposed to do this with that with cousin Henry, and we might take this time." And she was just like, "Take however long you need." And like a weekend before that, I was doing some other event with a different hobby, right? With this hobby, bottle that I've emptied recently, that I need to get rid of. And she was like, "Yep, just go, just do it," because she understands that like that helps keep me grounded. And by being like that, then when anytime she needs anything, I never say no, right? If it's like, hey, I need to do X, Y, or Z, or I just need a little extra time, I need a little extra TLC. Just, yep, you got it, because she does the same for me. And by sheer luck, she's fallen in love with a particular type of fish. So eventually, we've broadened it out, right? Because we did that first tank with my wife, aquascaping. We're gonna do another one. She's got a couple other things she wants to do long term that gets her a little more into the hobby. Still kind of passive, but that's nice. It's the fun part. So yeah, I guess the lesson is like, one, try to focus on the positives, even at the worst time. Focus on the positives. Learn your lessons, right? When you make mistakes, learn a lesson and endeavor to do better. Because as you grow your skills, as you grow your understanding, you will do better. That's the beautiful part, right? You will get better at this hobby. You'll be able to do things you couldn't have done 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And there will be things 2 years from now that you'll be doing that you never would have thought you were capable of doing. If you keep learning from your mistakes and always look for those positives. That's the beautiful part. You win some, you learn some. Zen Ginger has it perfectly. You win some, you learn some. We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents, right? It's that Bob Ross mentality. Try to take even the things that we think of in a negative and form them to be positive. Good stuff. All right, gang. We'll get out of my random ranting. Email coming. And we can do questions. So for those that do have questions, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see them. Saban's Creations. Go Hawks. We'll see. There's a lot of competition out there this year. And yeah, bourbon is definitely a hobby for me. I love the stuff. It tastes delicious. In moderation. Oh, man. Kingfisher Sketch. Did calculation on my future pond. It will be 9,300 gallons. Tell me why I shouldn't put fish in it. I can't tell you why you shouldn't put fish in it. I can't do that. I think at 9,300 gallons, you're basically obliged to put fish in it. Now, you could go weird, and you could do, like, not the atypical fish that you would see in a pond, like not koi or goldfish. You could look at, I know you can't have white clouds in Canada, but you could take some of the rice fish that can survive in cold water, right? That can survive over winter. And you could do like a crazy massive rice fish colony, which would be pretty amazing if you ask me. Or, do koi, because koi are beautiful. Obviously, I like koi. I don't have a 9,300 gallon pond. If I had a 9,300 gallon pond, I would have koi. Is that shirt Prussian blue and titanium white? I have no clue. Probably not. But yeah. Yeah. Koi love murdering plants. Yes, that's why we have a bog filter. We have all the plants away from the fish. And you can carefully use planters to get like immersed growth and stuff like that to hide them and protect them. There's all sorts of cool things you can do. Greetings from Jamaica. Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you. Fish Keeping Jamaica in the house. Reminds me, I got to catch up on your channel, man. I haven't seen some of your projects in a good 6 months. I need to go check out what you're up to lately. Bob Purcell, have you launched your second channel? No. I'm trying. I originally was doing some stuff, and then I got sidetracked on building out part of my space. I need to. I have a very large tank I need to move, and then once I get that out of the way, I can set up my space. And I've been focusing on honestly other things around the house, but I need to get to it. I need to. I guess I could say this. I have some time now. Because yeah, some of my suspicions were correct. So I guess I'll give you guys this update. I'm not looking at it super negative, but I lost my job. I was already thinking that I wasn't happy, and both me and one of our other engineers were late on a Friday told we don't need you anymore. Fun times. But thankfully I've already got some irons on the fire, so we'll see. Hopefully there won't be too long, but have a little extra time. Have spent most of it looking for a job now, instead of just passively looking for a job. But yeah, good times. But I'll spend a little bit of time working on some projects because some great advice from a really good friend of mine is focus on the things you can control to keep your mind okay. So a lot of that is going to be like doing a little bit of work around the house because that's stuff I can control, right? Those are the things that I can do that I'm making progress on that makes me feel better, makes me not like feel bad. But yeah, vibes. Thank you, man. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm oddly like, how do I put this? I feel liberated. Does that make sense? Where like I already kind of had something in my head where I was like, it's time. And then now it's just like, well, at least I know now for certain it was time. It was already in my head. I was already starting to do some work. I'm supposed to have, I need to get back in touch with somebody, but I'm supposed to be getting an interview already, actually, like potentially this week. So we'll see. Yeah. So I'm not too stressed about it. I've got enough in my like OS fund to last me a couple of months just in case. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to be sitting on the sideline too long because I know that between some different projects out there, I have options. So yeah. But I'll be working on some stuff. My goal is to launch my other channel relatively soon. But again, this is priority. Fish is priority because I love my fishies. And most of that content is, I'm going to try a few things that I normally would not try with fish because it's really easy to shoot stationary objects and do interesting camera stuff with something that isn't running away from your camera constantly. Where fish love to run away constantly. And it makes doing some of the things I have in my head very hard to pull off. So, but yeah. Oh, I appreciate it. Dude, I appreciate all the support from all of you. Thank you so much. Puffers rule, others drool. Oh, Leo. Weren't you on the Pleco train like 6 months ago? And all that kind of stuff? Yeah. I think I can remember a super chat from you not terribly long ago. It was like Pleco's rule. Oh man, your passion for like when you find something and you just like this is the greatest thing is something I'm almost envious of because I totally had that when I got back into the hobby for the first like 2 years because every new plant I got was now the coolest thing ever. Every time I got a new rainbow, it was the coolest thing ever. And I at times miss that level of like mental energy in my like time now where I'm like, how do I make this more manageable and set it up for long term? I want to enjoy something for like 5 years, 6 years, you know? You know? Oh man. Vincent, OS fund is a huge deal. Finding yourself is key. Says the guy still finding himself. Yeah, I mean, I would highly encourage anybody, how to put this, if anybody who is in a good place, always have yourself like an OS fund, right? As a just like if always have an emergency savings that if something really goes wrong, whether it's like repairs to a car or something, even if it's just like a few $100s, and I know for some people that's almost impossible, which sucks. Do not get me wrong. The way that our world has shaken up, it's getting way harder for people. Um, but yeah, if you can, make sure you have one. Find a way. Kelly Foreman, this is why I only consult now. I invariably dislike every job after 6 months. I usually do not dislike jobs. I almost never find myself in a place. Honestly, that's kind of the first time. No, that's not true. Second time. But the first time was after like 2 years. So, yeah. Johnny Best, any update on your Cactoli digital tank parameter reader? I never had one of those. Alex did that thing. I never had one of those digital tank parameter reader things. I wasn't terribly interested in that. Fistery has one, though. I would ask him. I get so many like random Chinese product offers, and I turn all of them down. I have no interest in any of them. Honestly, like, okay, chat, I'm gonna make a poll real fast. I want your opinion. Hold on, I gotta put this out. I can't spell. Probably spelled that wrong. Okay. Yes or no for you, chat. You get to determine this. Let me explain. Maybe take a sec before you vote. Some people are voting red. So, Aquarium Co-op, right? Corey's business. They've had a number of products recently that they were selling that they're no longer selling. And I've reviewed them. Two of them. Before they were removed. And my question is, do you want me to talk about it? It'll probably be in a negative fashion, but maybe some positives. Depends on how you want to look at it. About the wider problem that causes, which is to say, having products that get hyped up, they sell a lot, and then they get removed. Or, in some cases, they don't get removed. And we can talk, if I do this video, I'll talk about a product that should be removed from the market and is not. You should have clarified before making the poll. This is why you listen before you answer. No, I'm kidding. I can kill the poll and redo it. Here. Now that you've heard my spiel, here, I'll kill it and I'll redo it. Right? Now that you guys know, just poop. We'll do it. There, bam. Now that you understand what I'm talking about, new poll. Yes or no? Because some people won't be interested in that at all, right? Because like an example, I think Co-op is offering for any of the products they won't replace, they're just offering refunds, things like that, which I think is fine. Wasn't the Aquarium Co-op CO2 regulator just an F zone? Might have been. I answered the second one faster. But let me explain why. Because there's been part of me that's been wrestling with whether or not I want to talk about it. And not because I'm afraid of throwing shade at a company. I'm more concerned that part of my take on, because you guys know I like looking at the positives and negatives of everything, right? I'm actually more concerned that part of my take, people won't see it as being objective, but will rather see it as just like just defending company X, which it's not. Because I think there are a number of problems when you see multiple products, not necessarily all in a row, but multiple products that go on for a while and then get removed. And there are some like both good and bad things behind that. Ken's 3D, I'm still a fan of the Fluval 3.0 lights. I could say this almost aggressive, but I much prefer the Fluval 3.0 over the Aquarium co-op light. I would much rather keep buying the Fluval lights and using those than purchasing the co-op light, even though it's cheaper. But I think for people who don't want to spend that much money, but want a similar quality light, the co-op is a decent option. There's other options, do not get me wrong, but I think it's a good one. But I personally will just keep using Fluvals or use other things in some cases. My replacement regulator is still working, at least. Yeah, so what I understand with the regulators was, and I have some stuff elsewhere, but basically, if it didn't break right away, it would be rock solid. Hagen Hill design, buy used. Well, there is some cases to like not buy used on lights. The Fluvals you can buy used. They're usually pretty strong long term, but the green air pump, not sure what you mean, Steven, but yeah. So that's one of those things where like I thought about that. Apparently, dominant on the voting is the go in on it. So I guess we'll do that soon. I have another video coming out. Should be this week. That will be a little different, but then maybe we'll do that while I'm moving between other things. I wish my Fluval 3.0 had better spectra and were brighter. Great app. Well, actually, I think the app sucks, but it's good compared to a lot of other ones, but it's bad compared to what it could be. But I hope that makes sense. Our used Fluval lights are amazing. I mean, like, I've got a ton of them lying around, so I bought a friend of mine when he got out of the hobby had a bunch of Fluval lights and sold them to me at a like massive discount. So I have tons of spare Fluval 3.0s lying around the house. Probably should like, I don't know, sell those or something because I think I'm using them in almost every tank I can except for 3. Maybe it's 4. Not many. I use it almost everywhere. One of the reasons why I love my co-op light is no app, unless Algae in My Tanks for me has been solid. Yeah, some people don't like having an app. I do. I much prefer an app to just a simple on-off because I have more control. Right? The app allows me more control. But I'm also in a place where power outages basically never happen. We might have a power outage once a year tops. However, people in areas with significant numbers of power outages, they hate the Fluval app, right? And I totally understand why. And they would much prefer something with no app that's just on-off, and you're presetting the dim, effectively speaking, right? And I totally get that. Totally understand that. And that's one of the things that I would say is a selling point to say the co-op or other cheaper lights over something that's like the Fluval or something like that that is app powered when you're trying to like really get into what makes it great. Totally get that. I have yet to use one of those dangly USB air pumps, not overheat, and have the resistor melt into the motor housing. Design flaws are design flaws. I don't think that any of mine have had issues, but I only have like 2. So, you know, I think they definitely wear out faster than some other pumps that are out there, but they stay quieter the whole time. Because like a Whisper 40 will go forever, but that thing gets loud as hell, right? Which is hilarious that it's called the Whisper, but it is one of the loudest air pumps. They get so loud. Oh man, yeah. Sorry, bowling catching up between frames. Kenny, I respect it. Glad that you're out bowling again, buddy. I know for a while you couldn't because of injuries. Glad you're bowling. Oh, my buddy from Hikari, Mr. Wang. I only use the app once and never tweak anything afterwards. Yeah, I mean, that's typically it, unless, like, as an example, when daylight savings times hits, well, now the tanks shift around and it might mess with something. Or if you do have a power outage, you need to resync it, things like that. But yeah, when I whisper, I yell. That's basically the Tetra Whisper air pump. Oh man. See, this right here. You guys hear how much I'm an idiot? You know this. I laugh at everything. But this here is so therapeutic. If I did not have this hobby, I would not get to enjoy like laughing at some of the fun jokes that you all say in chat or just the interactions, things like that. Like this is part of why I love things. Leo29 also love how fish look under that light. I much prefer how my rainbows look under a Fluval light versus the Aquarium co-op light. The Aquarium co-op light shows a very heavy yellow cast, even more so than the Fluval. And the Fluval has one, right? Realistically, if for me, but that's because I keep a lot of rainbows. The best light I've ever seen on a rainbow is the freaking UNS Titan. It's like a portable sun, but all the iridescence that rainbows have goes bonkers under that light. And it's so like daylight spectrum pure white that they look knockout, right? But I've seen heavy red fish that look good under red light. Lots of cichlid keepers where they have like El Cheapo lights that are really heavy on blue, but they make their cichlids look really great. It's all personal choice. The thing is, finding the thing that you like the most is the right bang for your buck, gives you what you want, etc., etc., etc. Metal halides versus LEDs when it comes down to iridescence. I know some 88 gallery tanks are still powered by metal halides. I mean, my problem is metal halides are getting more and more expensive to replace the bulbs over and over again. So at that point, like, are you getting enough benefit to account for that? And to me, I'm going to say no way whatsoever are metal halides worth it. There are so many great LEDs that are out there nowadays that you just don't need to. It's such a minuscule upgrade compared to some of like the high level LEDs, and they cost like the same, except you got to keep paying for those replacement bulbs. If you could change one thing about the co-op light and Fluval, what would it be? Okay, for the co-op light, I would have it at a solid 5600K. That's it. Pure white. All white. No reds. None of that BS. None of the extra modes. I don't need a night mode. I don't need any of that. Just pure white. Then it also make the light cheaper. Pure white will give you everything you need. For the Fluval, honestly, they just need a big update on their app. Their app could do so much more. Very easily. But it's really clear that, like, or at least this is my impression. We'll put it this way. When Fluval built those lights, they hired a third-party company to design their app. And then they hired them like one more time to add in pro mode and some of those things. But they probably were just like, it's not worth spending the extra money until we bring out like a completely new light, right? Or something, whatever that may be. To me, if I were to change anything, I would find a way to get all of the light producers that are out there that use an app, whether it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, to open source access to whether it's the API or whatever their Bluetooth key is, whatever, so that third-party apps can connect to and control their light. Because if you had something that just detected, oh, you have a Fluval 3.0, I'll connect to it, and gave you more control and more features and was regularly updated, all of those lights that are app controlled would be so much better. Because the app isn't what brings you in money, it's the hardware, right? No, you don't need a bark. I know, the door moved a half inch because of wind. You don't need a bark. Oh, fierce defender, Shani, I know. Hopefully you didn't hear her. She's over on, she got up from my bed. Because when I have the window open and a fan running, because it gets hot in here, the door like jiggles just enough, my door to my room, that it makes noise and she thinks like somebody's coming into there, and then she'll run over to the recliner over here and poke her head out the window and try to find something to bark at. Dogs, what do you do? But yeah, those are the things I do. Those are the things I would do. Honestly, like, I have some wild ideas in my head, and I thought about using part of my, this is something I was thinking about earlier today. I thought about using part of my downtime to spool myself back up on some of the code languages I know, because I haven't been using them as much. And if I spool myself up enough between that and some of the like AI assistance tools that are out there, trying to design something. But I know that like my likelihood of doing it right is really low. Probably still going to spool up because I need to. Oink Master Supreme Oinky, so good to see you. So good to see you. Is there a canister you would recommend for a very patient person with multiple health issues, which includes difficulty lifting? I can take apart if necessary to reduce my heart strain. Good question. Good question. Let me think about this for a second, Oinky. I would think my first inclination. Hello, puppy. Because the second you start talking about difficulty lifting, my first thought is exactly where CoroWorks went. Make a sump. Because your maintenance can be as simple as just removing filter batting and putting new filter batting that is relatively cheap, and you're done. Because it'll catch all your particulates, or using filter socks. And there are a number of smaller sumps that you can get that will cost as much as some of the really nice canister filters. The only problem is, are you going to drill a tank, or can you get an overflow box in place? But if you understand how to operate sumps really well, sumps can be amazing. The next thing I would look at, similarly, and Abakov fan is saying this, is any of the FX series, so FX4, FX6, that have the drain port. Because you could hook up an external tube to that drain port and have that drain port wired into out your window or whatever, so that when you turn the nozzles, right, to make it so that no inlet and outlet is happening any further, you're not getting any extra water coming in, and then then you can open that drain port and fire it out the window or whatever to reduce the weight. So you get all that water out. And because water is still in the tubes, when you open them back up, water is going to free drain into the filter and fill it back up. It self-primes. If you do the maintenance correctly, FXs can be amazing. And as long as you're getting the water out, they're really not that heavy. The final thing I will say, they're a little expensive, but if you're looking at an FX, similar price, is Oase. Because the Oase Biomasters that have those awesome pre-filters, you basically only need to service the pre-filter. And they have a nice solid handle in the top So if you get one of the smaller ones, like the Biomaster was at 350 or whatever, so it's not as big, they don't end up being too heavy. There you go, Kelly Foreman. Apparently, Dee Dee can clean her FX by herself using the drain, but she's an exceptionally strong lady. So, but I still think like there's a couple of different ways. So things like that. Those would be the options I would put to you, Anki. Hopefully they help. Threadfin and Sumagill, they're both easy to breed. Great fish, great fish, great fish. I'm a bigger fan of like either the Furcata or the Luminatus in the Sunamagills than say the Threadfins, but Threadfins look cooler if you were to ask me. Well, Kelly, if you were to keep the really fine pre-filters on and you just clean those once a week, you almost never get anything in the main canister. They do most of the work as far as the chunks. Yeah. Threadfins also get quite a lot larger. That's true. That's very true. Very true. Very true. The whole thing gets gross. Kelly, what are you doing? I mean, I guess gross is all relative to each person. There's one other question I saw. I need to make sure. I think I missed it. Okay, Kingfisher Sketch. Fish room lighting. What's a smart way to go about it? I mean, if I had the budget, sure, fluvels everywhere, but trying to be conscious of cost versus output. So in general, what I would look for is probably, to be honest, is you can get the LED replacements that would go in like T5 lighting, right? And they come with a thing, so you can hang them up from like your Costco's and such. They're very common. That are basically just giving you like shop lighting. Now they are fairly bright, but you can put them above the tanks and basically in each rack have one light that spans multiple tanks. And what I would do is if they're too bright is have a diffuser in front of it. And that can be a number of different ways. It can literally be like some of the like the window cling type stuff that is frosted that you put over certain things. It can be a like physical like cheesecloth barrier. Like ways there's all sorts of ways to diffuse it. There are some now that are dimmable and programmable. They're a little more expensive, but there are ways where if you put like one light across multiple tanks, it can help you a lot. I know that Master Breeder Dean for a long time basically just used Phoenix Stingrays and would have one longer Phoenix Stingray cover multiple 10-gallon tanks or 20-gallon tanks and just have that like in the underside of each level of his racking system and made it easy so that one light is basically going across multiple tanks. That's how you end up saving money. Instead of having a light on every tank, you try to have one light cover multiple tanks. And then it makes your cost go down. And there's a lot of like inexpensive lighting that can be used really well in that kind of setup where you're not trying to get like these perfect, beautiful display tanks, right? You're trying to be a little more efficient about a fish room. And maybe you have a couple of nice lights on one or two display tanks. That'd be the path I would take. Me personally, when I was looking at some of my early fish room planning a while back, I was looking at I'm trying to remember who the manufacturer is. They're similar to those like the Hue lights, but they're kind of like a knockoff version of the Hue lights that still work pretty well, but you could dim them was the important part. So I could get them at 5600K, nice white, but not super powerful. And that's what I was going for. Because like you're not looking for super bright light on every tank in a fish room. You just want like sufficient light, you know. Path I would take. My wife's in chat. Hi, honey. You all seen the aquarium light that has half and half modes, like red on one side, blue on the other side? I have not seen that. That's interesting. New local Austin. Biofilm will grow in there. I mean, you want biofilm. You want the biofilm. That helps house a lot of your bacteria. Dean doesn't exactly grow a lot of plants. Yeah, but when you're doing like racks and racks of fish tanks, even if you have plants, you're probably using simple plants. You're not using like high demand plants everywhere, Kelly. We're not putting like your crazy display plants in every tank in a rack system. And I don't think that's what Joe's after either. Almost got the current USA Serene lights, even though everyone said they suck just because they're pretty. Well, if you want pretty, honestly, but they're still nice, I would look at either the Chihiros or the AI Primes. Those are great lights. They look amazing. They're not terribly expensive. Or apparently, just come to a Greater Seattle Aquarium Society auction and you can get Kessel's dirt cheap. Because I found out there were even more Kessel lights that sold after I left for like nothing. It's similar to when I got that 360X, right? That really nice, it was basically brand new in box. It looks like it's never been used. They had a $450 light for $74. There was another one, the W, so the previous version of that light, and it apparently sold for like $40 on a gooseneck. So it had the optional gooseneck and everything, and it sold for like nothing. Some of the things that show up at some of our auctions are wild. It's insane. All right, gang. Okay, Taylor Lee. I'll do this as our last question for the night, but yeah. Okay, I'll answer this one fast, and then I'll do Taylor's. What do you think about the Dustin's fish tank lights? They're literally just a light from a different company. They're very minimal in how wide their light distribution is, and they're very warm, which is to say they're just yellow and are warm white and regular white. So they, a lot like the Aquarium Co-op lights, will have a yellow cast, but because they're such a thin light and they don't have a super broad range, kind of like the Fluval lights do, you end up needing multiple for any of your tanks that have a reasonable amount of depth front to back, which makes them not worth it because they get very expensive very fast. If you've ever been curious about those lights, or at least the version that he used to have, he's changed those. I haven't looked. Let me look at Dustin's fish tanks lights real fast. He used to use these lights from a company that I'm familiar with. Equipment, lighting. Yeah, literally the same light still. They're a company called Reef Bright, but they have a freshwater light, and they might not be made by the same company, but they're knockoffs if they aren't the same one. Hold on. Let me go look at this. It's called the Luma Light Pro. Sorry, their website's kind of slow. I'm trying to bring it up. Whatever. I'll just bring up the generic like Reef Bright light. You can see it. But yeah, boom. There you go. Same light as Dustin's. Has some problems. Can do some things. Blah. Now, let me get this other question real fast. Taylor, could you touch on what's considered highlighting or what it means to be high-tech light for those higher light demanding plants? So, okay, let me break these apart. High-tech is usually not light. When we generically call a tank high-tech, it basically comes down to typically highlight demand, highlight use. But really what we consider the difference between high-tech and low-tech is injection CO2. If you are injecting gaseous CO2, that is high-tech. That's literally it. I mean, most of it is technically, it's a combination of things. where you're using a more powerful light, you're usually using a bit more equipment, etc. But realistically, most of the times we talk high tech versus low tech, we're just saying, are you injecting CO2 or not? Now, highlight, interesting. The way that we've traditionally defined low, medium, and highlight is based on the amount of par. And this, technically, it's not accurate to call it par. I understand this. But when you use a par meter, we always call it, it's putting out this much par, which is just the amount of light presence. And technically, when you're measuring it, it's not the par, but who cares? That's making it too complicated. Just think par, okay? PAR, photosynthetically active radiation. From 0 to about 30-35 is low light. From there to about 75, upwards of potentially even 100, depending on who you ask, is medium light. And then anything at 100 par or higher is high light. Sometimes it'll be as low as 75, but usually it's easier to say 100 par or higher equals high light. What the heck does that mean? The simple way to look at it is this. If most of your tank is lit, but a little dim, low light. If the top half of your tank is relatively bright, but you notice it falls off and gets a little dimmer the closer you get to the substrate, you're probably close to medium light. If the whole of your tank is bright and it's just like very bright up top, you're probably in highlight. This is the least scientific way to think about it. But that's kind of an eyeball way to look at a tank and go low, medium, high. The best way to do it is by measuring par and understanding that. And a lot of people who are using very high demand plants, like some of the super red rotalas or the pink flamingo crypts, all the like white Anubias varieties really like highlight. Usually a high-tech tank is both highlight and injected CO2. The Fluval 3.0 will give you highlight at maximum power up to about 16 inches of tank depth. And then after that, it falls to more medium, unless you've got a very tall tank, like 30-inch tall tank. And then at the substrate, you'd be at low light, but your kind of upper 2/3 would be highlight to medium light. Medium light kind of at the bottom, and then you start falling into lower light, because as light, the waves of light fall through the water diffracts it, and it slowly disperses it more and more, which reduces the intensity of light as it travels through water. Someone could explain this far more scientifically than me. I'm trying to keep it simple because it makes it easier to keep in your head to be like, this is what the heck is going on, as opposed to being perfectly accurate. We should know by now. I'm never perfectly accurate. I'm more understandable is my goal. But I hope that helps you understand, Taylor. I hope that gets you where you need to be. Vincent, have you done a video on the complicated discussion of low, medium, high light, or is it the issue hasn't been defined scientifically? Well, it kind of has been defined. The problem is, unless you are actively measuring par constantly, it's hard. And yeah, typically, as Action Stack is saying, this is usually, we're trying to measure the amount of light present at the substrate. Because as diffraction occurs, right, we measure low and all those kind of things based on that. So like, as an example, my running river tank, which you guys have probably seen in a number of videos, the light setting that it has is only like 7 par at the substrate. But up top, it gives me reasonable medium light, but I have all simple plants in there, so they do just fine. It's Java ferns and crypts. They don't need a ton of light. If I was using higher demand plants, they would hate it because it would be nowhere near enough. But what about wavelengths? Don't care. I see what you're trying to do. But yeah, great. Hope that helped. Gang, I want to thank you all for being here. Yeah, look out for this week's video. It should be with my buddy Robs from the Aquarium Guys podcast. That weirdo that you saw telling you all the ways you're not supposed to euthanize a fish in the last video. We actually have a really in-depth discussion about these like super invasive snails that have come around, the New Zealand mud snail, and what's going on and what you need to look out for, et cetera, et cetera. So look out for that. I'm in the process of getting that bad boy edited, and then we'll tackle a bunch of other stuff. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.